Hi, this is Aisha and welcome to a new video of readadayclub. So currently I am completely immersed in reading Shakespeare. So I want to read all of his most notable plays. So far I am done with Hamlet. I have read Hamlet, King Lear, The Tempest, and I just finished reading A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I'm very close to finishing Romeo and Juliet. I have a few that I want to read after this, obviously. So that is Antony and Cleopatra, Macbeth, The Winter's Tale, and Othello. Really looking forward to reading Othello. So now, if you're new to the world of Shakespeare, reading him for the first time can be quite challenging. A lot of reasons to that. The first is that Shakespeare sort of wrote in early modern English, which greatly differs from the contemporary English that we're used to reading. So a lot of his vocabulary and the poetic devices that he uses are difficult to understand without context. Secondly is the performance aspect. Shakespeare's plays were not meant to be read, they were meant to be performed, which means that the impact and the meaning of the words get lost on the page itself. Now, the first time I read Shakespeare was back in 2021. I haven't studied Shakespeare in school or in college. I was completely new to Shakespeare. In order to be able to understand and read Shakespeare, I was following a very specific reading method. And this is something that I do even with books that I know that are not easy to read. The thing is, the first time you read a book, just read it. Don't worry about highlighting, noting, or like summarizing or writing in the margins, sort of deconstructing each paragraph, at least not on the first read. Try to understand everything all at once on the first read. You'll simply succumb to just losing interest or just becoming very impatient with the book. Deep reading takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of mental effort, yes, but having to stop and dissect each and every confounding paragraph, how it relates to the paragraphs that preceded it, how it relates to the chapters that you just read, how it relates to the chapters that are going to follow after, all of that, it's not necessary to do that on the first read itself. Instead, what I do is I underline or like mark either passages or chapters that are either too complex, so I know that there is a lot more to it, it's just that I'm not getting it, so I just make a note of that. Keep reading even when you don't fully understand the point or just the purpose of the story or the text. It's still better than not reading the book at all. Reading a book for the first time gives you a good idea, gives you a general sense of the book, it gives you a feel of the book, it gives you some main ideas and some main themes, some things that you can underline that you find interesting, and it just gives you an overall structure of the book. Now, the weight of each word and the complexity of every sentence can get quite overwhelming when you don't understand them. But to truly understand a book, any book, whether it's a fiction, philosophy, psychology, whatever, you need to give it time. Here's the thing, don't expect to understand a book completely in order to like it or even enjoy it. What you can do instead is just underline or mark the passages or chapters that are are complex, you don't understand completely, but you know that there is a bit more to it than just the words on the page, and B, that you find interesting no matter what book you read. Like, for example, if you read Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant, there are in this whole big fat book, there are going to be sentences that you find interesting, that make you think, and you know that you can really peel back those layers with more knowledge, with more context, with more understanding of how to look at the same thing from a different angle. So just underline it or mark it, or just stick a tab in it, like just keep a note. Don't take notes as much as just underline the stuff that's already on the page so you can move on from it. Don't just get stuck in one place, because then that sometimes with different books have to be read in different ways. With books like these, what I do is my first reading, I'm not really setting high standards for myself when it comes to the first reading, because the first reading is just you getting familiar with that language. The next step of my reading method is something that happens after you finished the first read, and this is something that I've realized many readers skip, but I really think you shouldn't, because it's a really rewarding process, and which is that the stuff that you have underlined and marked, either because you found it too complex, you couldn't understand it, or because you actually found it really interesting, you can look them up online. Research the book at a very slow pace. You're not doing it in order to write a paper or a thesis. You're just doing it to give yourself that understanding, so you can take weeks and months to do that. I remember I took 6 months between my first reading of The Critique of Pure Reason and my second reading. So I just took my time. I skimmed through a lot of critical interpretations, watched a bunch of videos, read a lot about Immanuel Kant, which philosophers was he influenced by, and just so many ways of acquiring knowledge about a book and trying to look at it from different angles and perspectives. And all this you don't do because you want to form an opinion on the book. You do this because you're giving yourself a lot more flexibility and awareness about a book, because there's already so much out there. There's so much of supplementary reading that you can do about a book that is, like all the books I mentioned here that I will recommend are classic works of literature, both fiction and non-fiction. So there's already stuff out there that you can read and get your hands on. After a few weeks or months, you can read the book again, so rereading the book. So for example, with Shakespeare, I'm not really waiting for that long. I read A Midsummer Night's Dream. I took 2-3 days just reading stuff about it, taking some notes, then taking notes based on what I underlined, and even found stuff that I hadn't underlined that I realized were important. I reread the play again after I took my notes. Rereading this way just allows you to approach the book, the same text, with familiarity. So you can notice details that you missed in your first read, and also see how your understanding of the book, of the text, has evolved. And trust me, it does evolve. You start to see deeper meanings emerge a lot more effortlessly, and all that acquiring of contextual knowledge that you gain during that time, all of it just comes together, and you sort of appreciate the complexities of a text a little bit more than the first read. The best part about reading books in this way is that it introduces more and more layers to your reading. So each time you revisit a book that you like, or that you want to like and enjoy a lot more after understanding it, you find more and more reasons to appreciate it. To be able to read like this consistently, you have to let go of the narrative that, oh, there are so many books to read and not enough time to read them in, so why bother and waste time rereading? Because if you think like that, if your intention of reading is that, you're never really going to appreciate books the way they are meant to be understood. And then even the books that you will have read, there will be no depth to your reading of them, to your experience of them, to your memories of them. And this applies to both. This applies to reading fiction as well as it applies to reading non-fiction. And so the books that I recommend you can apply this sort of reading method to are all classic works. They're all fiction, because I have a video where I recommend philosophy books for beginners. So for non-fiction, you can refer to that video of mine. Of course, I would recommend reading Shakespeare, because his plays inspired this video, just me talking about reading and how I read. So you can read any of his plays, whichever one interests you first. I want to do a video very soon talking about all my favorite Shakespeare plays. The next book is The Sea. Now, approaching Murdoch's novel this way lets you really penetrate the deeper layers and meanings of the text. It's a book full of just philosophical underpinnings, and it really helps you get under the skin of each character. Now, on the surface, Kobo Abe's stories are still readable and engaging, but to really plunge into just the psychological depth of his characters and understand their existential themes takes time. And just like Shakespeare, Kobo Abe's works can involve a lot of cultural nuances that may feel like unfamiliar territory. So reading interpretations will help you understand those layers and uncover those layers gradually. I would recommend reading anything and everything by Dostoevsky, because it's worth reading and rereading multiple times. The first reading is always just you understanding the main themes and the story without getting bogged down in every intricate detail, because Dostoevsky's writing is so dense and reflective of its time. It is challenging to appreciate the psychological and philosophical nuances in one go. Now, with Italo Calvino, rereading is an absolute must, especially the complete Cosmic Comics. It's intricate, abstract, fantastical, and so much of it is based on scientific concepts. So you need to put in some time and effort before you can really appreciate just the interconnectedness of his stories and the underlying philosophical questions they evoke. Now, I would say the same thing about the works of Jorge Luis Borges, because there are so many intertextual references and complexities about serious themes like identity, reality versus illusion, the nature of knowledge, etc., that it's easy to get lost and feel overwhelmed when you try to figure it all out on the first read. Next is another reason why I put Malloy, Malondies and the Unnameable here is because I can see why disliking Beckett, and especially this book, is easy because of a lack of understanding. Beckett really pushes the boundaries of literature, so it's easy to feel discouraged by his initial grittiness and ambiguity. But when you do understand the philosophical and literary context in which Beckett wrote, it can really change things. The next one is Faust by Goethe. Now, not only the way Goethe is written, but what Faust is about, so much of it references to mythology and philosophical concepts. And I missed out on most of them. In fact, I think I would say 95% of them during my first read. It was only when I reread Faust, and after having read a few things about it, was I able to understand it a lot better in my second read. The last one is Clarice Lispector. Now, with this book, you have to inhale this book over time. Let it sort of dissolve into you, because you will only then notice details about it that you have missed initially, and see how every element contributes to just the novel's philosophical depth. Reading Lispector like that is a very rewarding process. It's because her writing is so psychological, it's so incisive, it's so intricate. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked my recommendations, and yeah, this is Aisha from Read a Day Club, and I'll see you guys next time.